Everybody in your places. Richardson reads. Take 57. Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd do the jet lag book tag today. I was tagged by Steve Donahue. Um, the jet lag book tag was originally created by B.M. Gregory. I'll link B.M. Gregory and Steve Donahue down below. I thought I'd start this book tag in a way that would be unique for me, but very common for Steve Donahue. And that's with a mailbag opening. I tried doing that once before and could barely get the package open, which was a little embarrassing. But I've seen Steve rip open so many packages, I thought, well, I got to be years and years younger than him. I should be able to do this. So I'll give it a try. And in this case, the package is from Steve. So let me see. That's pretty easy. Oh, very nice. Robert P. Watson, The Ghost Ship of Brooklyn, an untold story of the American Revolution. Let's see here. Capo Press, 2017, finished copy. The most horrific struggle of the American Revolution occurred just 100 yards off New York, where more men died aboard a rotting prison ship than were lost to combat during the entirety of the war. And I had mentioned to Steve that, and it's illustrated, that the woman who gave my libraries the land that the building stands on, her grandfather was a Revolutionary War veteran, and he had been held on one of these prison ships. And just how horrific some of the story, just what I knew about how horrible it was, and the fact that he even survived. A lot of it was disease and all that. So I'll read this with great interest. Thank you. So this tag is about travel, and so I thought that I would give a little idea of how much I travel. I tried to go through in my head all the different countries I've been to. I've been to Italy, I've been to Spain, the Balearic Islands, which are some of my favorite places on earth, Palma de Mallorca. Been to the Rock of Gibraltar. I've been to Amsterdam, Norway, Sweden. Sailed to the Orkneys, Shetland Islands. I've been to Poland. I've been to Moldavia. In what was the former Soviet Union, I've been to Leningrad and Moscow and a few places in between. I've been to Canada. I like old Quebec City. I've been to, and I've been to Montreal. I've been to Mexico. Visited some of the Mayan ruins and stuff there. And then the Caribbean. I've been to a lot of the islands and things in the Caribbean. So I've traveled a bit. A lot of places I'd still like to go, obviously. Love to get to England. Love to get to Wales. Love to get to Ireland, Scotland. Each for different reasons. I do not like to fly. I do not trust airplanes. I'm never comfortable. I stress out with it. I love going on ship. So I've done most of my travels, but I have flown quite a bit. I flew to Soviet Union. I prefer going by ship, and if I can go by rail somewhere, I like that even more. And I drive all over the United States, and I've lived in all four corners of the country. So I've traveled quite a bit. So the tag itself says a book that made you tired, which would make sense with a jet lag tag, right? So the first thing that immediately came to mind was this bruiser. This Modernity Britain, 1957 to 1962. Look at that cover. Family sitting around, family sitting around the TV. Let's see. 872 pages. It's Modernity Britain, 1957-1962, by David Kynaston, Bloomsbury, New York, London, New Delhi, Sydney. Mr. Kynaston's got quite a resume of writing. This is the first U.S. edition of 2014. It does have illustrations, which tend to be photographs. There's two sections of them. Like I say, over 800 pages. And I'm sure it's a great book, or a good book of its type. Wow. I can't get in 10 pages of this thing before my eyes start glazing over. I've tried it 3 different times. And I don't know if it's just because when I'm on page 10, I know I've got 817 to go, or what it is. But that would have to be hands down. I don't even know why I still have it in my collection. It is a beautiful book, but yeah. A book that made you confused. This one was, again, very easy to choose. And it's this thing here. Another bruiser, but it's made me confused. Didn't make me want to give up on it. This is the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, edited by Pamela Jackson and Jonathan Lethem. And it's a Houghton Mifflin Harcourt book out of Boston. And this is the first edition of 2011. It's confusing because the author is all over the place. It's hard to know what in this is real. It's hard to know whether he knew the difference between what was real and what wasn't. It's rambles. The subject matter, a lot of times, is an exegetical work. So with my background, a lot of times get the references with no problem. The problem becomes how he maps them onto his reality, such as it was. So this is a confusing book. He was such an important figure in our literary history. And whether you like him or not, he has had an impact. That I've always felt like it makes sense to try to come to some sort of understanding of his thought. But if this is his thought, it's pretty wild stuff. But that one I will keep working on, as opposed to the first one. A book that opened a whole new world. Well, for this book, it opened a whole new world, but it did it in tandem with a television show, which also had a companion book, which is not the book I chose, though I could have. And that was the World of Myth, or The Power of Myth, with Bill Moyers talking to Joseph Campbell. A lot of that took place at Skywalker Ranch, which George Lucas owns, and George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. Moyers did a masterful job, I thought, in letting the pure magical storytelling ability of Joseph Campbell to come through on that series of documentaries. And it was about mythology and myth and all that in a way that I'd never seen before, and a lot of people have never seen before. So I went out and I found, and they were easy to find, because I did it early enough, his 4 volumes of Mask of God. And I just brought up here the Primitive Mythology volume. You can tell it's quite an old book. There's Mr. Campbell. Irish storyteller for sure. Here are the end papers. Mask of God. New York, Viking Press, 1959. So here in the Primitive Mythology, we have Toward a Natural History of the Gods and Heroes, and that's broken into 3 parts. The Lineaments of a New Science, The Well of the Past, and the Dialogue of Scholarship and Romance. Then he had Psychology of Myth. He was very influenced by Jung. In fact, the Viking Portable Jung is edited by Joseph Campbell. So introduction, the lesson of the Mask, and then there's the imprints of experience, the enigma of inherited image, the mythology of the primitive planters, the province of immolated kings, the ritual love death, and then he has mythology of the primitive hunters, so he does shamanism, the animal master, Paleolithic caves, and then in part 4 is the archaeology of myth, mythological thresholds of the Paleolithic, mythological thresholds of the Neolithic, and the functioning of myth. And it's there in part 4 that I really became inspired, and I was an archaeology major as an undergrad. So, and Campbell talks a lot about archaeology, and some of that may or may not be dated, depending on what you're looking at. But it was an inspiration for me, along with C.W. Serum's book, who I've also shown before, his Hands on the Past type stuff. So I would. There's 4 volumes in all, and I've got them. So it would be Joseph Campbell, The Mask of God, and that was opened a whole new world for me. Number 4, a book that made you feel sick. Clive Barker, In the Flesh. This little thing was Poseidon Press, New York, 1986. I just read you a little. I'm not. I do read horror fiction once in a great while, and some of it I like, and some of it I'm not so good about. But I don't read it a lot, so I'm not a connoisseur. So let me read you a little section, and maybe you'll understand why I reacted the way I did. Panicking, Cleve turned back to the door and renewed his tattoo. There was somebody running along the landing now. He could hear shouts and imprecations from other cells. "Jesus Christ, help me," he shouted. He could feel a chill at his back. He didn't need to turn to know what was happening behind him. The shadow growing, the wall dissolving so that the city and its occupant could come through. Tate was here. He could feel the man's presence, vast and dark. Tate the child killer, Tate the shadow thing, Tate the transformer. Cleve beat on the door till his hands bled. The feet seemed a continent away. Were they coming? Were they coming? The chill behind him became a blast. He saw his shadow thrown up onto the door by the flickering blue light. Smelled sand and blood. And then the voice, not the boy, but that of his grandfather, of Edgar St. Clair Tate. This was the man who had pronounced himself the devil's excrement. And hearing that abhorrent voice, Cleve believed both in hell and its master, believed himself already in the bowels of Satan, a witness to wonders. Sorry about the rough reading, but that was just a part I felt like I could read on the video. Not another writer who's had a genre writer who's had an impact, so I wanted to read him, and I did. But Yeah. So, and then here, the last question, number 5, is a book that you read on your last long journey. And that would have been my journey at the time from Albuquerque to Chicago to Warsaw and flew into Leningrad. And this was in 1991. So I managed to be there that summer and all that for the coup. Saw a lot of things there. It was a very exciting time in the world. And I carried with me a whole packet full of notions about the Soviet Union. I had a sort of black and white movie of the place in my head, but I was excited to go. And I didn't know a lot about it. And the world and the news in those days and how we learned about what it was like behind that Iron Curtain. It's quite different than today. So I had some preconceived notions, and most of which were wrong. And I had some ideas, almost all of which were wrong. So, but I did know that literature was a big deal there. And when I got there, that was proven to be true. They were great readers. I don't know if it's still true, but it was when I was there. And I knew their national poet was Pushkin, and I also knew I didn't know a thing about him. So I decided to bring this book, The Letters of Alexander Pushkin, 3 volumes in one, translated with a preface and introduction and notes by J. Thomas Shaw. This is what it looks like. Paper bound things. And back then, of course, when you got on an airplane, you could bring quite a bit of stuff with you. And that also was different. So, the University of Wisconsin Press, Madison, Milwaukee, and London, 1967. And this was valuable to me on many levels. Along with it, I bought a couple of the Penguin paperbacks with Pushkin's works in them too. It wasn't just the letters, but the letters are what I really got into. And some of the reason for that is I left Leningrad and did a field school down in Kishinev, Moldavia. And in his exile, Pushkin had spent time in Kishinev. So I'm reading the letters while I'm in the same place that he was at and stuff. So I really, really did enjoy those. So that would be the last book I took on a long journey. And I'd like to say thanks, Steve, for tagging me on this. And I'd like to tag Ernest Lee Eston. And unless he's already been tagged, I'm not sure. I haven't seen him do this one yet. So, thank you, BookTube.